All right, so let's do the show on the MacDev Clone GT. Okay, so MacDev, been in paintball for many, many years. I'm just kind of doing a history of you guys. I believe the first gun that came out was the Sonic Autococker. And if you remember the Sonic Autococker, I had one. It was a really cool gun. This was, I think, came out around 2001, 2002. Then they came out with their first Cyborg, which had a cult following. A lot of people love that gun. A lot of people still use that gun. Then they came out with the Droid, which I love the Droid. That was one of my favorite guns they ever came out with. It just was a real smooth, polished gun. It just shot amazing. Then they came out with the Cyborg. What was it? The Cyborg RX. And then they came out with the Clone, which what Russian Legion was using. And then they came out with an updated version of the Clone, which was the Clone VX. And then they came out with the tactical drone. Then now they've also got the Drone DX, and then now we got here now the Clone GT. So they're not exactly releasing a brand new product every single year, but they're definitely releasing a lot of products. So, especially here within the past 3 to 4 years. So, packaging's good on it. It's got a nice soft case, color manual, lube, tools. It's all here. So comes stock with, I believe, a 691 barrel back. Let me just check really quick. I believe it's a 691 barrel back. And then one of the upgrades that you can get, even though they were really hard to get, I believe they're now getting a little easier to find, is you can also get a shift kit, which has all of the additional inserts that you might need, starting with the 681, 685, 689, and then the 693 to complement the 691 that comes in the package. So I believe the shift kits are a little over $100. These were very difficult to find for quite some time. As a matter of fact, I believe about one of the few places you can find it at is if you actually went to an event and got it directly from MacDev. But I believe the availability of them is getting a lot easier. You're starting to see like A&S Gear's picking them up now, and so you can get the shift kits from there. But also, I think the other place you can get them from was directly from MacDev's website. It was just very difficult to get the full shift kits up until about a year and a half ago. Another thing they've got now, they got the pressure tester for the GT. So if you remember the previous guns used to have like a little, you just take the regulator off and screw it into a gauge or like an ASA with a gauge on the side so you know what your operating pressure is. But always historically have operated pretty low pressure. I think one of the few things that I've always been holding MacDev back was just not necessarily their customer service, but their lack of perceived customer service. You look on their website and you see the distribution centers, but it's like, where's the repair center and how to get in touch with them? I mean, and I know they're trying to do their best on getting repair facilities, repair facilities up and running. But like, Planet Eclipse, Rhode Island, always. That's where you always send your guns if you're in the US, if you're in the USA. Bob Long, California, Dye, California. So I think the fact that, throughout the years, they've had a little bit of inconsistency about repair centers. Where do you send it? You got to send an email to them so they can tell you where to send it, stuff like that. I think it's kind of made a lot of customers a little bit uneasy about purchasing their products. But here recently, I believe about last year, they worked out a deal with a company called Aggressive Sports, which is owned by a gentleman named Eric Royston. He was at World Cup. And you can go to aggressivesports.net. And that's where now the new MacDev repair facility is for the USA. So I actually had a chance to test out the customer service. My boy Luke's his Clone GT, it was leaking from somewhere on the inside. I couldn't figure it out. I think I got debris in the solenoid. Sent it in 2 weeks later, came back, and it's working great. So no issues, no problems there whatsoever. I filled out a repair form that was on there. I printed up a repair form, filled out the information, and sent it in with a gun. 2 weeks later, it came back and was shooting great. So no problems there. I will tell you this, that, obviously this almost goes without saying, when you start getting into these macro lineless guns, okay, there's no macro line here, you obviously want to be looking at a lower pressure regulator, okay? You don't want to be putting the same amount of pressure you put into a Tippmann into these, okay? The reason why is the air travels up through the grip frame. The grip frame is removable, and just like the Lux and just like many other, the G6R, many of the other macro lineless guns, the macro line is running up through the inside through a series of air transfer tubes and little sealing O-rings. You put too much pressure in there, you're going to shred those O-rings, the gun's going to leak like crazy. So you definitely want to make sure that you're getting a lower pressure regulator on these guns, or you're asking for leaks all over the place. If you've got a standard Ninja tank, you can do something as simple as just pulling the shims out and testing the pressure. You should be able to get it down about 450, 500 psi, which should be just fine. If not, pick up an SLP regulator, you'll be good to go. Let's go ahead and get started on the efficiency test, and then we'll come back and do a disassembly, and then do our conclusion. All right, so we're about to do the efficiency test here on the Clone GT. Now, apologies, the little gauge that we had isn't working right now. I think the battery's died on it, but hopefully we can get this close to the camera here. We're sitting at probably about 4,400 psi, and tank is actually not that hot. This is probably about 80-90 degrees. This tank already had air in it before we filled it up, so let's go ahead and chronograph. So we're sitting right at about just a little bit over 290. The last 3 shots were a little over 290. That one was just under 290, but I think we're sitting right at about just a little over 290. So we'll go ahead and shoot a couple over the chronograph here. So it's an average is 288 plus or minus 10. So we'll shoot another one. Yeah, so that's about where we're at. So getting a couple hot shots over 300. I'll turn it down just a little bit. Okay, that's a little better.
Say almost 10.
We get 2, 4, 6, 8, 9, probably about 9.5 pods. I know we're breaking some paint, but it is a little bit cold out here. And also we're shooting J.I. Milson 4-star from World Cup, and this stuff is pretty brittle. So we got a little bit of cold weather, and it's also pretty brittle. So we'll probably be breaking a little bit of paint today. Thank you. Okay, so let's go ahead and we'll go ahead and weigh the gun first. There we go. Okay, so it looks like just over 2 pounds. So 2 pounds, 0.8 ounces. So just under, or just over 2 pounds. That's a pretty light gun. And let's go ahead and let's remove the barrel and get that out of the way. Okay, now the first thing we'll do is we'll take apart the regulator. And MacDev in the manual, they recommend doing this about once every 25 cases or 50,000 shots. I don't quite know if I would go that long without cleaning it and lubing it, especially when you first get it. You know, just as the O-rings break in, stuff like that. A lot of times there's a little more debris in the gun than usual. But, you know, I know it's got a filter inside the regulator that would definitely help the you know, a lot of the debris and a lot of the bigger stuff from getting into the internals of the gun. Now there's not much inside of this. If you wanted to take it apart, you can, but pretty much the only thing you've got here is just your reg seat. And this is if you ever have velocity creep, okay, if all of a sudden you realize that your velocity keeps going up and up and up, it's usually your reg seat. And the way how you preserve that is if you're at a high pressure and you need to go down to a low pressure, you need to keep shooting your gun to keep stabilizing the pressure as you go down. If your gun's got a ton of air and all of a sudden you just tighten the hell out of your velocity adjustment screw, what you're going to end up doing is creasing this, and that's when you're going to damage your reg seat. And this is, you know, this isn't just with this gun, this is with all guns. You're going to damage your reg seat, and then that's when all of a sudden you start getting the velocity issues, is when you've got a ring on this reg seat. So basically it looks like a pencil eraser. But that's just a little tip on reg seat. Anytime you're doing adjustments on the at the chronograph, you want to make very small adjustments, and you want to keep shooting your gun so that way you're stabilizing the pressure whether you're going up or down. You don't want to crank the thing in like 3 turns and then start shooting with a fully pressurized gun. That's a bad idea. Okay, so that's how you take apart the regulator. Real simple. Nothing to it. I'll just gently slip that back into the gun. Now, with the regulator, you've got two basically you've got 2 different types of screws that go into the bottom of it, okay? And it's not necessarily deceiving, but you do have to be careful. You've got the big Allen key, okay, which is the, this is the 1/4 inch, the big Allen key, which is what removes the entire cartridge. Then you're going to use a smaller Allen key, which I believe is probably like a 1/8, to actually adjust the velocity. So, you know, it's kind of like the back cap on a die, or the LPR on a DM. You've got the big, you know, the big Allen key, which is what removes the cage, and then you've got the smaller Allen key that goes up the middle. So, okay. Next thing we're going to do, let's go ahead and take apart the bolt. Now, I've got the manual here to kind of describe some of the bolt parts, because there's a lot of them. You know, there's definitely quite a bit. So what you do is go ahead and pick this up. Sorry, hands are a little bit greasy. So pick this up and then pull out the bolt. Now, usually anytime I'm taking apart a spool valve gun, the first thing I always do is remove the front bolt, O-ring. You know, you see some techs sometimes when they're in a rush, they won't do it, but I tend to like to do it. So a little bit of dirt inside this gun, so I'm just going to clean it as we go along. So the first part we're going to take off, this is called the bolt keg. Okay, and out it goes. Got the bolt keg. This is the spacer. I said there's a lot of parts in here. Okay. And you do need to be, a little bit careful when you're taking this thing apart, especially for the first time if a lot of these parts have been torqued down, because a lot of these metal pieces here are very sharp. So, you definitely want to use some sort of cloth or towel as you're taking it apart for the first time, because, you definitely don't want this thing to slip and end up slicing a finger. I mean, there's a lot of pretty sharp edges here. I mean, they're not sharpened, but, you've got some pretty decent cuts here in the aluminum, and under a lot of force, under a lot of tension, you could definitely slip and possibly either scratch or hurt yourself. So this is the valve keg right here, and this is the valve getting to the bottom of it, power tube, and that's pretty much it. So we've got a lot of parts here inside of this gun. And and I will tell you this, that the one thing you don't want to do with a gun like this is over lube it. Bad idea. If you coat this thing in Dow 33, what's going to end up happening is the basically all the lube, the over lube, when you put too much in there, what it ends up doing, it just ends up shooting out your barrel. And then what, because that lube is really thick, it ends up coating your barrel, and your, accuracy goes into the toilet, because the whole inside of your barrel now is lined with a very thin amount of sticky lube that's going to grab onto every single ball that goes down the barrel. So I'm just going around and using a clean swab and just cleaning up the insides of these parts. And that's it. Now I know there's a lot of parts here, and at first it might be a little bit intimidating, but the most important thing is that they all work together great. Using this gun out there on the field, I mean, it's a very, very smooth shooting gun. So, I could really, at the end of the day, really care less about how many parts or whatever's on the inside of the gun. How it shoots on the field is the most important part. So we're gonna start putting this back together again. So what we did is we stuck the power tube into the, I believe we call it the power tube cap. Okay, so let's go ahead and put the valve back inside the valve keg. Now the cool thing is that, I mean, this really only goes in one way, so it's, even though it might look a little bit complicated, it's not, because the valve only goes in one way into the valve keg. So now that we've got the power tube here, what we're going to do is just go ahead and throw a little bit of lube on it. Okay, screw that together. Now what we'll do is we'll go ahead and put a little bit of lube here on the spacer. Now the thing with spool valves is, remember, you've always got O-rings on the inside and the out, and on the outer side. So you want to make sure that you put a little bit of lube on both. We got the spacer in there. Now what we can go ahead and do is let's go ahead and put some lube on the bolt O-rings. Now, something else I get to, a lot of people, well, how much lube should I put on there? Usually, when it comes to lubing O-rings, I put just enough lube to basically fill the cracks in on both sides of the O-ring, and I don't go any more than that. Usually, if you've got to go more than that, the O-ring's damaged and you just want to replace it anyway. So, basically what you want to do is you see the O-ring, you see the groove, put just enough in there to put a nice little line around both sides of the O-ring, and to make sure that the O-ring has got a little bit of lube on it. Above and beyond that, you shouldn't need to lube it much more than that. If you've got to lube it more than that, chances are the O-rings are damaged. Just replace them. So, and kits are cheap. O-rings are cheap. You get 1,000 of them for like $1. So, O-Ring Monkey, that's a great company to get O-rings from. A lot of people freak out like, O-rings are impossible to get. Well, they used to be, back in the late 90s, especially when you were, early 90s, stuff like that. I mean, O-rings were a pretty big deal. Just, the only place you get them is from the paintball store or from the manufacturer, and they can charge whatever they want to for them. But nowadays, you've got, O-ring companies now that are doing a great service inside a paintball by having all of them. And the best part about that too is you don't have to worry, if you want to experiment with some different lubes on your gun, well, the only thing that's going to happen is, your O-rings might get damaged and then you just end up replacing them. So, to an exception, you don't want to end up, blowing your solenoid by putting like Vaseline or something inside your gun. So, all right, so what we're going to do here is just basically just throw, a little bit of lube. Around the outer O-rings. And then something else I always like to do is, especially on spool valve guns where the whole entire bolt assembly slides into the gun, is I like to just put just a little bit on the inside here to keep everything happy as it slides in. Maybe it's just kind of me thinking back to my Mark days where if you inserted it wrong, you end up shredding engine O-rings, but there we go. So we put that all back together. Really simple gun to take apart. It's also got a really nice bright LED OLED screen on it. Very easy board to program, take apart, stuff like that. Something else that's really cool is, let me see, I'll pull the trigger, hopefully you can see that. It's got laser eyes, which is really cool. Something else too, a lot of people ask, well, how come, I've got laser eyes, but, it's only working on one side? Well, the reason why is because you've got a transmitter and you've got a receiver, okay? If both laser eye beams were, on, well, which one would find out if, which one is the, receives the signal that the eyes, that a ball dropped into the eyes or into the breech. So that's why, you've only got the laser eye on one side. One's a transmitter, one's a receiver. The laser beam goes across, from the transmitter, and the receiver picks it up. When a ball breaks it, that's when the gun knows it's ready to shoot. So that's why, when you look inside your gun and it's got laser eyes, you only see the laser beam on one side. All right, so that's about it for the disassembly, so let's come back for the conclusion. All right, so let's wrap up the Clone GT. What do I think of it? I mean, this is a very soft, very quiet shooting gun out there on the field. It just shoots really nice out there on the field. I mean, it is just absolutely whisper quiet. The regulator, once you set it, your velocity is going to be really consistent. It's got a really nice barrel. Clamping feed neck. About one of the only things I don't like about the clamping feed neck is that it elevates. There's a gap between the feed neck and the feed tube, and basically what it is, there's about maybe 2 millimeters worth of room where dirt can get inside there, and that's one thing that I don't particularly like about the feed neck. Okay, now they've done this with many of their guns, and I don't know why. It's driving me crazy, but you dive into the snake or dirt hits this gun or paint hits this gun or something like that, you get shot from the side, it's going to get down into your breech because there's, it's probably about thick enough for you to put a nickel in there. And it's just it's a wide open gap on the back of the gun. There's no reason for that to be there. And especially for players like me, 6'4", when I dive in the snake, dirt flies everywhere. Okay, it really flies everywhere. It gets all over my gun, gets inside my mask, gets everywhere. But and when I this gun, when I take it apart, especially after playing really hard with it, I've got dirt inside of my inside of the gun, and there's just no reason for dirt to be inside the gun unless it gets in through the hopper. Well, it doesn't. It gets in through the feed neck, and it's just something that I just wish MacDev would correct. I don't know if it's tolerance or maybe they just don't think it's that important. But the fact that there's a channel there where the paint, dirt, debris can get down into the feed neck, because basically you've got the feed tube here, the clamping feed neck's here, you've got the loader on top, but the loader only goes down to right there, and you've got this exposed air area. I don't particularly like that. And also it's the same thing with, if you're out there and you're playing in the rain. If you're out there playing in the rain, your gun's pointed down, water's going to get down into your feed neck. So fix that. Please fix that. The other issue that I have with this gun is just the MacDev triggers. They're okay, but for what these guns cost, I wish they were better. Okay, I mean, there's a ton of good trigger designers that are out there. Okay, Walter from Violent Products Pro Star Paintball makes amazing triggers. John Paul, Critical Paintball, makes amazing triggers. I mean, I don't know where Jason Watson from Technic Triggers, I haven't seen him in years, but there's some really good trigger companies that are out there, that can help them design a better trigger. I mean, even the axe for, I know this one's a lot more expensive, but even a bone stock axe with, that even if they were just at the level of the axe trigger, it would be such an amazing improvement to this gun. It's almost like having a Porsche and having a milk crate for a seat. You know, it's just, you know, fix the trigger. Okay, I mean, they've had this same trigger on many of their guns, and you know, there's a ton of side-to-side play. There's a ton of rub inside of the trigger well. It just doesn't go with a gun that shoots this good. Now, in PSP, it's not that big of a deal. Okay, you could use a piece of wood for, you know, your trigger in PSP. I mean, if you can do this, you're ramping at 12.5 balls per second. But you know, when you're out there and you're trying to shoot in semi-auto and you're looking for the highest rates of fire possible, and you're trying to make sure that you know, that trigger is just a precision bearing guided trigger that just comes back with ease and goes in and out with ease, that can make a huge difference. So, you know, triggers that rub inside the wheel, inside of the trigger well and stuff like that, definitely can affect the rate of fire. But other than that, I mean, MacDev is just like right there on the cusp of, you know, really just shooting to the moon in terms of the popularity of their products. You know, I know that, you know, they're a very small company. You see them, you know, you see their booths at Cup and stuff like that. I mean, they don't roll out with the huge trailers and stuff like that. So I know they're a very small company, and they're just right there. You know, I think now I had a chance to meet Eric Royston of Aggressive Sports. Really, really nice guy. You know, my customer experience with getting my friend's gun teched and fixed was a very positive experience. So I definitely think that they're on the way. And you know, they keep cranking out great products. I mean, everything about the gun I really, really like, except for, you know, the little gripe about the feed neck, and obviously me wishing that they designed a little bit of a better trigger. But other than that, I mean, feeling, you know, grabbing it in the hands, it just feels really good in the hands. You got plenty of room around the regulator so that you're not going to get your fingers caught or anything like that. There's not really any sharp edges on the trigger guard. Grips are very stiff. You know, there's not a lot of grip, you know, on here. I mean, it's almost a hard plasticky feeling grip, but you know, the grip frame is luckily thin enough to where you can get your fingers in there to really grip the gun if you go and make a dive and you need to tweak it up or something like that. You know, I would like to feel slightly softer grips, especially once you start getting sweaty and stuff like that, or the gun starts getting really shot up. You know, those little tackier grips will come in handy, but not that big of a deal. You know, that's really just a preference thing. But other than that, I mean, you know, as far as it shooting on the field, is whisper quiet. Very, very soft shooting gun. Just an absolute pleasure to shoot. This is one of the guns that when you shoot it, you know, you're really going to keep going back to the chronograph when you first get it and wonder, is this thing really shooting 300 feet per second? I mean, am I getting drop off? Why is this gun shooting so soft? That's just how it shoots. Very, very quiet, very soft shooting gun. You know, 290 feet per second with the Clone GT, I mean, feels like 240 feet per second with other guns. I mean, it's really just, it just does. When you first shoot it out there on the field, you're like, there's no way I can reach that player on the other side of the field. I've got to be shooting 220, 230 feet per second, and it just zips right across the field and hits the person, you know. So there's definitely a little bit of a learning curve just because of how quiet and how soft this gun shoots. But hopefully that helps you make a decision on the MacDev Clone GT. You know, those little minor 2 greps on that is an amazing shooting gun. And now that we've got more availability now with the shift kit, I think this is a great investment to get with it as well. A little bit expensive for only 4 inserts, but at the same time, your gun is still going to match up really nicely. You got the 91, you get all the other inserts in here. And on a gun like this, you know, boring it to where you just slightly overbore the paint definitely makes the gun shoot a little bit quieter because you're not getting the air blowing past the ball and down the barrel making a lot of racket. So, you know, if you pretty correctly bore the paint on this gun, it's going to make your gun even quieter. So I think that's about it for the Clone GT. Thanks for tuning in.